what to do when you swing and you don't catch. During that same rodeo, I used Ace, and part of the ranch rodeo was a deal that we called horse catching. And what you had to do is you had to take your saddle off. You had to put all 3 horses in this round pen that we had set up, and you had to go out there like they do on the big outfits and everything, and you had to rope your own horse, but you had to throw a hula hand loop, which, usually you throw a loop like this. You had to do a backwards loop, and that's just how you usually catch horses, and it had to be a hula hand loop. And so I'd never really, roped horses or anything. I mean, they were usually in the top of trees hiding from me, and I just set up the net underneath, and we'd shake the tree till the horse fell out. If you were here last week, you got that. And so I got Ace in the pen, and for like 2 hours a day, I went out there, not just to practice my hula hand loop, but to also practice with Ace. Now, if you've ever seen Ace, this is his excited. That's about as excited as he gets. But I got in there, and I threw that loop, and he went. Mainly because I had missed about this far. So he scooted over, being a good horse he is, to where I had thrown. So I took my loop, I swung it again, and roped my hat. I never claimed to be a good hula hand thrower. But anyway, so I finally got to where I wouldn't rope myself, and I was throwing at Ace, and I'd catch his tail, I'd catch his head, I'd catch an ear, and he was just standing there. And so, man, I got to where I could catch him on nearly every throw, and I'd move around him, and he'd be like, oh, good grief, please get me through this. He was bored to tears, and I'd give him some grain afterwards. He'd even take 2 steps towards me when I had the grain bucket. I mean, that was way excited. But when we got into the pen with the stands full, and they're come to watch us, and this was my event because there was nobody else. Now, you could throw as many loops as you wanted to, but there was a 3-minute time limit. So we all had our loops ready. We all had our saddles right there. You had to go in. You had to hula hand your horse, drag it out, saddle it, bridle it, and then once all 3 people's horses were caught, you had to race down the other end. And I tell you what, let me tell you something. If you've never saddled your horse as fast as you can and threw the bridle on his face and jumped on him and gone like this, it makes for a good wreck. There's a cowboy preacher from Alpine about 60 miles away. He was on his good horse, and he did that. That horse pitched with him all the way down the arena. But I wasn't worried about that with Ace. And so I said, man, I've been practicing. Let me go first this time. They're like, yeah, get in there and go first. And so I went in there, and I threw my loop. What? And I missed by about 9 feet. And so instead of just building another one, what we did is we had the gate cracked about this far, and I just jerked my rope and I stepped out because only one person can be in the pen at a time. And I got out of there, and Bailey stepped in. And he threw, and Bailey missed. So Bailey jerked his rope out, and Tommy stepped in, and Tommy, of course, he got it on the first try, and he drags his horse out. And so I go back in, and I throw, and it's the prettiest hula hand loop you ever saw. And it lands right on Ace, and he goes, "Woo!" and threw his head down and jerked out and started bucking around the deal. And I was like, what in the world? So I jerk my rope, and I step out of the pen. Bailey goes in there, and Bailey throws. Bailey misses. So by the time Bailey threw, I hadn't even built my loop back. So I got my loop back, and I jump back in there, and I throw again, and I miss again. So I pull my rope out. This happened 6 times. Now, I didn't miss every single time, but Ace did not want to be caught. Bailey, I caught before Bailey did. But me and Bailey basically caught on back-to-back loops. And I drug Ace out of there, and there's only a 3-minute time limit. And I put that bridle on his head, and I think the bit was up his nose. He was throwing his head. I didn't care. Had the back cinch on the front cinch on the back. Didn't care. Cinched it up. Bailey got on there. And we got a time. A whopping fast time of 2 minutes and 58 seconds. What happens when you do throw your loop? And what happens when you don't catch? Do we just give up? Or do we keep trying?